Uncanny Valley, fact or fiction? In 1970, roboticist Masahiro Mori proposed a hypothesis to account for an emerging challenge in his field, namely that you will experience a sense of unease if you encounter a robot that looks too much like a human. Now, here I am introducing the roboticist, and so I don't need a comma after roboticist, and I don't need a comma after Mori either. So both A and B are wrong. And I can't have commas before and after the name because that would make this additional information. And it's not, right? I'm introducing the roboticist, so it's C. Proposed a hypothesis to account for an emerging challenge that you will experience a sense of unease if you encounter a robot that looks too much like a human. If a robot looks a whole lot like a real human, it makes folks' skin crawl. So this is way too informal. When a robot doth a human resemble, the beholder must assuredly tremble. So this is too Shakespearean. People react negatively to robots that closely resemble human beings. So this is a concise way to say this, right? And this is too long. I mean, it's not informal or anything, but it's too long. So D is the best way to say it. The problem, he argued, is that a robot's likability has a non-linear relationship with the degree to which it resembles a human. That is, robots bearing little or no resemblance to humans elicit little response, and as robots resemble humans more closely, their likability increases, with moving robots that completely resemble humans being the most likable. Okay. Now here I have to talk about bearing a resemblance, right? So not BABEARING, and elicit, not illicit, because illicit is illegal. Elicit is to bring out. So this will be D, that robots bearing little or no resemblance elicit little response, and as they resemble humans more closely, their likability increases. However, Mori speculated that likability plummets for robots in the 75 to 90% human resemblance range, but that the drop occurs only if the robots are moving. Okay, which choice most accurately represents the information? So you're talking about human resemblance and likability. So likability increases, and then it drops, but the drop is more precipitous for moving robots compared to still robots. The drop is more pronounced for moving robots. It's not just for moving robots because it's also for still robots. So A is wrong, but the drop is more pronounced for moving robots. And the change in likability is not identical. And still robots are not the least likable, it's the moving one. So B. Mori's name for this proposed zone of decreased likability, the uncanny valley, alludes to the eeriness and unfamiliarity evoked by his uncanny valley hypothesis. So I think we should make it a little specific. This is repetitive. I'm already speaking about the uncanny valley, and it and that are somewhat not specific, right? So the unfamiliarity evoked by these almost but not quite human robots, right? So not using pronouns here. Though Mori's hypothesis initially received little attention, the concept has crept into popular culture. So that is wrong, because when I say though his hypothesis initially received little attention, that's a dependent clause. So I need a comma after attention. Because and while, none of them make sense because I already have though here. The concept has crept into popular culture mainly to explain why CGI in movies sometimes alienates audiences. One reviewer of the 2017 film Justice League, for instance, invoked the hypothesis to criticize the filmmaker's decision to hide an actor's mustache under a clean-shaven, CGI mouth, writing that the actor had an uncanny valley thesis statement resting on his top lip. So I need to decide actor's mustache, right? Singular actor. So it has to be apostrophe S. So it can't be B and C. And with filmmakers, I need to again have a possessive because it's their decision, right? So it can't be D, it's A. One reviewer of the film invoked the hypothesis to criticize the filmmaker's decision to hide an actor's mustache under a clean-shaven CGI mouth. Although The Polar Express is another film often used as an example of the uncanny valley, critics who casually employ the concept should remember that Mori's original graph does not represent actual data collected in a scientific study. In fact, those who have conducted such studies have reached an important conclusion: the uncanny valley might not exist. Okay, now we are saying that some critics have criticized films that use CGI, and then I'm saying that critics who employ the concept should remember that it was not based on scientific study. So the way the first statement, the first option is written, it doesn't make sense because it doesn't provide a transition. While Justice League also featured other CGI characters who were less uncanny, even though the idea of the uncanny valley has become a convenient shorthand for describing off-putting CGI, given that Mori's hypothesis was first published in 1970. So this is C because, I mean, here we are talking about a critic talking about uncanny valley to criticize CGI. And then I'm saying, even though this idea has become a convenient shorthand, they should remember that it is not based in, it does not have a scientific basis. So B and D don't provide that transition. Psychologists from Emory University conducted an extensive review of existing research on the uncanny valley, finding mixed and at times contradictory evidence supporting its existence. Without consistent terminology, it is likely that studies are measuring different, though related phenomena. The Emory team concluded that while the hypothesis is plausible, the empirical evidence is ultimately inconclusive about whether a robot's likability and its human resemblance share the relationship proposed by Mori. At this point, the writer wants to add, importantly, they found that Shinwakan, a Japanese term used by Mori, has been inconsistently translated as likability, affinity, and familiarity across studies. Okay. So I'm basically talking about there is mixed and at times contradictory evidence without consistent terminology. So I need to provide some evidence of consistent terminology. And that evidence can come from this statement that this term, the Japanese term that Mori used, has not been translated correctly across studies. Okay. It provides necessary context to understand the discussion of consistent terminology later in the paragraph. So I like A. It illustrates how scientific terminology can change over time. No, it's not doing that. Which studies translate Shinwakan? That's not relevant. Yeah, so it is A. This is a good answer because it explains this consistent terminology in the next sentence. The film critics uncritically accept the uncanny valley as a proven fact is not surprising given the many misconceptions about human psychology that soak popular culture, that permeate popular culture, right? I'm looking for a word that indicates that there are misconceptions that are there in popular culture. So soak, drench, or submerge will not convey that sense because they're very physical words which are related to, liquids. So permeate is the best answer. Still, as CGI and robots increasingly become fixtures of society, those who discuss such matters can increase their knowledge by reading Sigmund Freud's essay, The Uncanny. Which choice provides the best conclusion? Have the obligation to heed the evidence? Should advocate for more realistic CGI in movies? Might want to spend more time around humanoid robots. So it's B, because we're saying that CGI and robots are increasingly becoming fixtures of society. And so, if you want to discuss these issues, if you're interested in these matters, you have to heed the evidence. And the evidence is mixed because what Mori did was not scientific, it was just his views that were translated into a table. So, more realistic CGI or humanoid robots of Freud, none of that is relevant as a conclusion.